Welcome back to the Saturday Scholars College Football Podcast. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. That is Gonzo. I'm Shub, and today we got some good content for y'all. We are going to be covering the Heisman Trophy reaction, which happened last night. Cover some other award winners briefly, get some thoughts on that. Gonzo, you're back from vacation, so need to hear your thoughts on what's been going on lately. But on top of that, we're going to get into grading head coaching hires, talk a little bit more transfer portal. And then at the very end of this pod, we are going to be doing a hypothetical 12-team college football playoff, basically bracket fill out. So we're going to go through and pick what the hypothetical 12-team playoff would look like this year. And we're each going to pick the winners of those games and kind of see how it would play out, or at least how we think it would play out. But we'll save that towards the end of the pod. A lot of good content to get to today. This is going to be broken out into a lot of good videos for the channel, especially the head coach hiring grades. Those are going to be really fun. So without further ado, Gonzo, welcome back. So before we get to Jaden Daniels winning the Heisman, which congrats, by the way, you're an LSU fan, LSU law alum. I need your take. What's your brief thoughts on the college football playoff and everything that's gone on? Because it's been a little bit of time since you've last were on this pod.
Well, yes, it's good to be back, Shub, and I'll get right into it. It's a travesty. It's an absolute travesty. You win every single game you're supposed to at the Power 5 level. You beat the Heisman winner, and they leave you out because you're down to your third string quarterback. It was a tough pill to swallow. My sister went to Florida State. I mean, she was livid about it, and she's not a super diehard football fan. So that shows how much this is kind of disseminated throughout the whole college football universe. So I didn't agree with Alabama being put at 4. We can do all the best team arguments that we want, but I really think that an undefeated Florida State deserved to actually play the game against Michigan. And let's see what happens. If it's a blowout, okay, so be it. We've had many blowouts in this playoff. All of a sudden, we're concerned with blowouts. Can you name on the top of your head 5 super close games in the college football playoff? It's hard for me until like maybe the last few years. So most of these games are blowouts anyways. And the fact that Ohio State was given a chance in the first year of the playoff, I want to say as well, in the first year of the playoff to win with Cardell Jones, and Florida State all these years later is snubbed of that opportunity because of Jordan Travis's injury. I just think is terrible. As much as I've been against expansion, I've been on the record against expansion for this kind of reason. I'm excited it's happening. I'm almost wondering with my CFB and non hat if this was all intentional to get people like me and potentially you to be like, you know what? Yeah, I guess expansion is good. So this doesn't happen again. It's just really convenient that they wait till the last year of this format to do this. And I think it'll be a very interesting playoff. And Nick Saban's a great coach, so hats off to him. I mean, beating Georgia's no small slight, but I think in my version of the bracket, I would have definitely had Florida State, and I would have made an argument to maybe if you're gonna have someone at 4, for me it would have been either Georgia, or Florida State, which I know that gets wonky because Georgia did lose the head-to-head to Bama, but I think it just sucks for FSU, and it sucks for Georgia too. I think that gets ignored a lot because they're a 2-time champion, but you were literally number 1, and kind of like old school BCS days, you lost and you got booted out, like. Just like that, life comes at you fast. So it's going to be a great playoff, but I really feel for Florida State fans.
Yeah, so that's a pretty much universal opinion across this podcast. I'm sure you listened to our ones last week. I share the same sentiment there. But yes, as men of principle, we think Florida State gets screwed. But as just purist college football fans that just want to watch a good product, I think this will definitely be the better quality product with Alabama versus Michigan. So in terms of the actual games themselves, I will enjoy them. But as men of principle, Florida State should have been in. So at least we can agree on that. Well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about there, but we've exhausted that. I'm sure a lot of you probably are exhausted. You don't want to hear more playoff talk. How about the Heisman? The Heisman Trophy presentation was last night. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman. And you know what? For a hot minute there, we were kind of doubting whether or not he would actually win it. We thought, the three of us shared the same opinion. We thought Jaden Daniels should win the Heisman. We thought it was pretty much set in stone. Yeah, Jaden Daniels should win the Heisman. I thought it would be a slightly closer than it was, but yeah, what's your overall take on this one?
Very excited for Jaden. Very excited for LSU. Very excited for LSU's chances of landing Bryce Underwood after Jaden winning the award. It's just a great story. I mean, his teammates are literally putting his from Arizona State are putting his stuff in a garbage bag, and they're happy he's leaving. And he comes to LSU and wins the school's third ever Heisman. I mean, and no, there's no national championship because it's historically the worst defense in school history. You went 9-3, but he was just electric. It gives me faith that the regular season still matters. That the best player can still be the best player even if he isn't on a 12-0 team. All respect to Michael Penix, who I was scared he was going to snipe Jaden. I was, because he won the Maxwell, and I was like, oh my gosh, is this some kind of indication that he might take it at the last minute? But it was so well deserved. What Jaden Daniels did with his feet, with his passing, he's made himself a potential top 10 draft pick, period. Just so happy for him and LSU. He's a great guy, doesn't speak a lot, soft spoken, I'd say. Thought he gave a fantastic speech, and just super stoked to see the school's third Heisman and second in only 4 seasons.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. Who would have thought Joe Burrow wouldn't be the last LSU Heisman for the next 4 years? And then they got Jaden Daniels, so that's 2 within a 5-year span, right? So that's pretty good, man. That's
Yeah.
pretty good for LSU. I did like his speech as well. And yeah, that whole Arizona State incident, I remember we were covering that at the time, Zayn and I, when we first started this podcast. It was that 2020 season. And I just remember covering that at the time. And I just remember thinking, how did this not blow up into more than it was? I just thought, I think it's just because Arizona State's not a blue blood program. They're sort of like, they do have a little bit relevant of potential, but they're not really that, not a lot of casual football fans care about Arizona State. I live in Arizona now, so a lot of people here are ASU fans. I work with a lot of ASU alum. I know a lot of them, but just college football just isn't, it's not like the Southeast, man. It's just not the same. And college football just isn't like that out here. But I thought that story should have been a lot more than it was. I was surprised that whole Jaden Daniels, the whole COVID stuff, the whole scandal with his mom buying plane tickets for recruits, which, that whole dossier pretty much that they had to bust Herm Edwards and his staff during the COVID years. How did all that not grow into a bigger story? I guess just because it's Arizona State. But if that
Yeah.
was, Texas A&M, or if that was Ohio
Oh,
State, or
front
doing all that
page.
stuff, that would have been like the story of the decade. But I guess it just
I
got blown over because it's Arizona State.
I think it's all a testament to Brian Kelly and the program he runs. And this isn't an LSU, this isn't going to be an LSU promo, but he got Jaden to buy in. I mean, he came in when I thought Miles Brennan was going to be a starting quarterback, and they'd use Jaden in these kind of run situations. And lo and behold, he wins the job, and it was so Burrow-esque. That first year, serviceable, decent quarterback. Then he just takes this elevation that a lot of people did not think he could take. Heck, I didn't think he'd elevate like this to win the Heisman, for goodness sake. But just a class act. I mean, the fact he thanked Herm Edwards in the speech and that staff, like the guys he was saying, I'm like, fight for cause, as I'm like watching it. Just real classy move on Jaden's part. He's going to be successful in life, whether it's in the NFL, which I anticipate, and just in life in general. I mean, great kid, so well deserved. And I was saying about like Michael Penix, hey, you didn't win the Heisman, go win the Natty.
Yeah, exactly. Penix and not Nix, but Penix definitely has that. I think if you're Penix, you take going to the CFP and winning a Pac-12 championship any day over the Heisman. And I'm sure that's
Mm-hmm.
the answer he would have. But yeah, I mean, hey, I just
Mm-hmm.
wanna toot our horns a little bit here. I'm pretty sure, was
We all
it
called
both
it. I
of
mean,
us when we did our
all of us.
preseason Heisman's? I had Jane Daniels and Michael Penix as 2 of my 3 finalists. We only picked 3. We were
Yes.
only allowed to pick 3, and I believe 2 of us nailed 2 out of the 3 Heisman finalists.
I I had Daniels at 1. I had Klubnik at 2, and I had Penix at 3. So Klubnik, big fat miss, but that's
Yeah.
okay considering that literally, like you, 2 of the guys I selected were in New York and actually were the 1 and 2 in the Heisman final standings.
See, I'm pretty sure I had Jaden Daniels number 2 and then Penix is number 3, but I still had
And
Caleb Williams going back to back. So I
I
swung and missed there, but I had 2 out of the 3, so I'm pretty proud of that.
and I think Zan might have had Corum.
He had
I could
Corum.
see him having.
Yeah.
I could see him having maybe Jaden Penix and Corum or Caleb. I don't know, but
He had
something one
Caleb
of those
Williams for
combinations.
sure.
But Corum
Yeah.
was in his. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, I just want to toot our own horns a little bit there. But yeah, just really quick, I think the people saying that he shouldn't have won the Heisman because of LSU's record, I'm like, man, the point of the
Play
Heisman
defense.
Trophy is it's supposed to be the most outstanding player in college football. The most outstanding player in college football does not play defense. Like quarterbacks are by far and away the most important position on the field. But this isn't the NBA. This isn't like LeBron James going to the Cleveland Cavaliers and carrying a team to the final. Like the quarterback can only play half the time. He's not even on the field when the defense is on the field. Like I think I'm sorry, but like for those of you who are into that, it's like, bro, quarterbacks don't play defense. Like, do you understand how football works? How can you hold his defense against him? He's not
Look,
even on the field
look,
when opponents are scoring 50
look,
points a game. Like, he can only do so much. If you give Jaden Daniels a
look,
top 30 defense, LSU is in the college football playoff. Like, that is totally
yes.
independent of Jaden Daniels. I cannot fathom the fact that people still sit there with and just are legitimately believe that the Heisman winner should be on a team that has a great record. I do you watch football?
No. No. And if you go back, as I've heard, the guys that did win in the 70s and 80s, like those were like 4 loss teams. I mean, it should be about wow factor. Manziel, what? They went to a Cotton Bowl? They didn't even win the division.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll tell you this, like LSU loses to Florida, loses to Texas A&M, loses to Arkansas, gets even more demolished by Florida State, doesn't have a shot against Bama without Jaden. Like I'm not kidding. Like this team is barely a bowl team without Jaden Daniels. I'm not like 6-6,
Yes.
maybe on the fringe.
If
Like
you gave Jaden
he,
Daniels that 2019 LSU defense, that team is in the college football playoff.
yes,
If Jaden Daniels got the same
absolutely.
defensive support that Joe Burrow got, that team is in the college football playoff. I'll say that at a minimum. But I still do not believe that people still think that quarterbacks are the ones that also play defense and ultimately decide who wins the game. Like, bro, do you not understand how football works? Sorry. Moving on. So
No,
it's time to talk about some transfer portal, man. We've got a lot to get to today, but I think we need to cover some of the players that are in the portal right now. And by the looks of it, man, since Zane and I last recorded, a lot has happened. A lot has happened. And
mm-hmm.
you know what? We have some commitments already. Not just 100% predictions, we have some commitments. And man, this thing just explodes like a bomb. The minute the portal hits, man, the quarterback market goes off. Zan and I were able to cover a good bit last week. So it's time to go through and cover the next batch of quarterbacks. So starting off, we're going to go with the guys that either have already committed or guys that are 100% 24/7 sports predictions. So, i.e., they are in all likelihood going to those locations. Let's start off with our second batch of quarterbacks. Dylan Gabriel, former Oklahoma quarterback, he has committed to Oregon. He entered the portal since we last recorded, and now he has committed to the Oregon Ducks. What's your take on this one? Because I would say, as of right now, this is probably the most impactful commitment of the 2023/24 transfer portal cycle.
My thoughts, Shub, are it'll be business as usual at Oregon with Dylan Gabriel coming in. I mean, they took Bo Nix, who looked absolutely just done as a player, as a quarterback at Auburn, and they revitalized his career, made him a Heisman finalist. They're gonna get him at least a shot in the NFL because of how he did. And I think Gabriel will do great there. He'll flourish in that system. And, I've heard some say Gabriel's just really a good college quarterback, not maybe an NFL um ceiling type guy, but that's what you need to win a championship. You just need a good college quarterback. So I think it's a great ad for the Ducks, especially with Ty Thompson entering the portal today. I mean, you really were gonna be kind of in a hole there. So I think he's gonna do fantastic.
Yeah, but Ty Thompson's portal entrance was a result of Dylan Gabriel going to Oregon. But
Yes, that's a good point.
But you know what? I agree with you, man. Dylan Gabriel is he's the perfect example of a guy that's a great college player but doesn't have that NFL ceiling. And you know what? Dylan
Mhm.
Gabriel's in college football at the right time because this is the new era. We can play college football and still make, high six figures, even seven figures on, just playing college football as long as we can, exhaust that eligibility out.
Mhm.
And that's what Dylan Gabriel is doing. And you know what, man? He's probably better off staying another year and probably making, I'm assuming he's going to make seven figures at Oregon. And it's like, hey, if you don't really have an NFL ceiling, or maybe you're at best, you're like a career third string quarterback in the NFL, like go ahead and play another year of college ball and make $1 million. That's still life changing money, and you'll also have a chance to win something significant at the college level as a starter. And you get to play, you get to be the guy at a college program. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of this. Will Rogers, I think, is another example. We talked a little bit about him. Dylan Gabriel is a guy that can definitely give Oregon a high floor. I think in terms of Oregon, next year they will have another high floor, but being in the new Big Ten, and they got some big boppers on their schedule next year. I don't know if he's going to give them as high of a ceiling as they had this year with Nix, with the way that Nix was playing. But I think the floor for Oregon has been lowered just a little bit, but it's going to stay there. And I think if you're Oregon, I think if you are Dan Lanning, that's kind of what you were looking for. You're looking to get the guy that can, hey, he's going to win us at least 8 games next year, no matter
Mhm.
what. Good college quarterback. And that's what Dylan Gabriel is. Very
There's
accurate.
there, there's proof of concept. There
Yes.
is absolute. There's no one. I don't think there's any unknowns. It's, can you unlock that next potential? Which maybe you can.
Kind of feel like we know who Dylan Gabriel is. I think to me, it's more of a high floor play, and it's a guy that can hit those check downs and do exactly what they need him to do. So I'd say probably a good land for Oregon, though I was really interested to see if they could get one of those other guys like a Cam Ward or a guy that maybe had a higher ceiling. But this one makes sense though, and I think if you're Oregon, you got to be happy with this. Like you're still gonna have a good team next year, at the very least. Aiden Childs, boy, ooh, Oregon State fans. Listen, this one's tough. This one's tough to swallow, but Aiden Childs is in the portal now, and we've liked him from the very get-go. We've liked him when he first committed to Oregon State. He was a 96th grade recruiting ranking on 24/7 Sports, and now he's got a 100% prediction to Michigan State. So in all likelihood, Aiden Childs is going to be following his head coach out there to East Lansing. And you know what? This one's not surprising at all, but at the same time, whew, Michigan State's looking pretty good right now. I'm liking the future outlook for Michigan State if they can land Childs here, which it looks like they will.
No, I think he's got a very kind of favorable schedule to get his feet wet as a collegiate starter. I mean, your some of your toughest games, Ohio State is at home. Then you're gonna go play Oregon. Who knows what Iowa will look like? I mean, they might still have a good defense, but who knows if Phil Parker gets poached or if Ferentz retires. Play at Michigan, and then really, I mean that's it for like your tough games next year. So I say all that to make the point that this is a good first year for him to take the reins in a rebuilding year, and then potentially in his, assuming he redshirted in his redshirt sophomore year, then so in 2025, maybe Michigan State can compete to be an upper half part of a team in the Big Ten and potentially be a playoff dark horse. So I like that, and I like that move for Childs because it just makes no sense to stay at Oregon State and beat up on Mountain West teams. All respect to everybody in that statement, but can't blame the kid one bit, and it makes sense. Follow the guy who recruited you.
Amen. And are we looking at the same schedule here? Because I see at Oregon, at Michigan, and
Yeah.
Ohio State on that schedule. Or are you
No,
talking about all
Ohio
the other
State at least
games?
is at home. Ohio
Yeah.
State at least is at home, but yes, besides those three, I think all the others are at least,
Okay,
you
I see
know,
what you're saying.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, I'd say outside of those three, which they're going to be underdogs in, but outside of those three, like if this Michigan State team reaches its ceiling in year one with Jonathan Smith, this could be a 9-3 team. I think best
Yeah.
case scenario, they go 9 and
I
3.
mean, if Mel Tucker can do it for Pete's sake, why not Jonathan Smith, who you could argue had less resources available?
Right. And Aiden Childs is the key to unlock that potential right there. If you're going to do
Yeah.
that, it starts with Aiden Childs, and I like it at quarterback, man. I'm very excited to see how Michigan State looks next year, and Aiden Childs is part of that process. So if he commits to Michigan State, again, it's if as of right now he hasn't committed, but in all likelihood he will. That's a great get for the Spartans. How about next up, Will Rogers, Mississippi State, former quarterback from Mississippi State. He has a 100% prediction to Washington. Now, this one surprised me a bit. This one surprised me, not going to lie. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I absolutely love it. You're bringing in a absolute veteran who's seen and been through it all. I mean, he had a coach die. Rest in peace to Mike Leach, one of the greats. He has seen it all. He's going to Washington to a phenomenal system with Coach of the Year, Kalen DeBoer. I mean, look, dude, Penix. I didn't think Penix was anything leaving Indiana. When he went to Washington, I'm like, okay, sick. And he becomes a Heisman finalist, and the story's not over with him yet. In terms of a national championship and an NFL future. I think it's a great move for Will Rogers. I think it's a great way to salvage what's left of his collegiate eligibility to go to the Big Ten with Washington and compete for something relevant. He never had that opportunity at Mississippi State. Let's just call it as it is, and great on him staying there as long as he did, breaking records. But this is a good selfish decision that I think every kid should make. Be selfish. Do what's good for you because you only get to do this for, 4 to 5 years of your life. So fantastic. I love it. Maybe my favorite of this new wave right here, to be honest.
Yeah, I am in agreement there. In fact, I would say that Will Rogers, I think, benefits the most out of anyone from this decision to go to Washington. I think this is something that Will Rogers can thrive there in that system with Kalen DeBoer. The only issue is you're going to lose Odunze. You're going to lose a few of those receivers, man. Like this is a star-studded team. It's not going to be the same team next year. There's going to be a drop-off. And
But I'm sorry, Shu. Yep.
And next year's team is just, I mean, let's just call it like it is. It's not going to be as good as this year's Washington team. But if you are Will Rogers in DeBoer's system, he can thrive. And I think it's going to be a really good super senior season for him. I think he's going to be 23 or 24 now, or that's what he's going to be next year.
Yes.
Yeah, he's getting up there. But hey, you know what, man? Like go there, make almost nearly $1 million, whatever he's going to be making there with NIL, and enjoy your last year or so of college, man. That's the way to do it. And I kind of feel like I noticed a theme here. Washington and Oregon going to the Big Ten next year. They both have other guys they could go. They had other ways they could go in the portal, but they decided we're going to go with these very veteran, high floor quarterbacks and Will Rogers and Dylan Gabriel, respectively. So I kind of feel like that's kind of the direction that these coaches are looking towards, and the way that they're thinking is, hey, let's get these very fifth year, sixth year, high floor quarterbacks to sort of bridge us into the new Big Ten.
No, it's a win now approach is how I'm looking at it. And for Will Rogers, what I forgot to mention during my little monologue is it's a chance for him to show that he's just not an air raid guy. He has a chance to go into a new system that isn't thrown on him, like 8 months in advance, and with competent offensive coaching, and maybe carve out, a day 3 NFL selection for himself.
Hell yeah, Will Rogers, You can bump your stock up a little bit at Washington and maybe make a good living as a career backup in the NFL. I think
Oh yeah,
that's
oh yeah.
that's the path for him, man. This is the way. This is the way, Will Rogers and Dylan Gabriel for that matter. So yeah, it'll be very interesting, man. I'm liking that. I'm liking these quarterback portal landing spots for Washington and Oregon, respectively, and for those two guys. Next up, and I wish Zan was here for this one. Max Brosmer, the New Hampshire quarterback, is coming up from FCS, and he has committed to Minnesota. Now, all I want to say is if you watched our first transfer portal video or you listened to the full podcast or watched that video, Zan literally called it a complete shot in the dark. He said he thought Max Brosmer would go to Minnesota. He's like, I just could see him going to Minnesota. It sounds like a Minnesota quarterback. And that's where he committed. And I promise you, he had no sources, no inside, nothing, just complete blind guess, shot in the dark. Like that seems like such a Minnesota quarterback. And he's committed to Minnesota a few days later. I couldn't believe it. I wish he was here on this one because it's just nuts. So if you were listening to that and you thought maybe we had some insight, no, that was just a complete blind shot in the dark guess. But man, that's a hell of a guess for Zan right there. So yeah, as far as Max Brosmer himself and this new addition for Minnesota, how do you view this one?
Well, I'm looking at his numbers. He's thrown for 3,000 yards the last two seasons. Nearly 30 touchdowns the last two seasons. Interceptions under 10. Completion rate in the low to mid 60s, which is absolutely fine. I think it's an upgrade than what Minnesota was running with. And this is the guy who had faith in Kaliakmanis, who took Minnesota's over. And obviously Kaliakmanis just transferred out. But I think Brosmer, it'll be interesting to see how he does in the FBS level. I think, again, not knowing any much more about him, I think it's a fine pickup for Minnesota. I mean, you got a decent SCS kid to commit to your school. And even though they're going to be losing some weapons and the league's going to get harder, I'm intrigued to see if this will be enough to at least get Minnesota bowling every year. But I like it more than I hate it.
Yes, I like that saying. I like it more than I hate it. Yeah, he's got a big arm. We'll say that. He's got some arm talent. I think if you're Minnesota, from a pure passing perspective, it's got to be an upgrade over Kaliakmanis. And hey, I was also there with you on I bought into the Kaliakmanis hype. His nickname was the Greek Rifle, for crying out loud. Like, how could you not buy into that? The Greek Rifle did not deliver. He was the Greek water gun. But you know what? Now Minnesota has what do we call him? The New Hampshire nuke. What do we want? Okay. Is that a good way to put it? The New Hampshire nuke.
I like that.
I like that. So, hey, you gotta keep it up, man. And I think Minnesota definitely, you could tell that they want to go a different direction there with Brosmer. So, but we'll see how that one pans out. And I want to see where Kaliakmanis ends up too in the portal, because that man's got some talent. He just, it might not be over him just yet, but I'll be interested to see where he goes. But most likely probably somewhere G5, I would guess, but we'll see. Mm-hmm. Brock Vandegrift, he has committed to Kentucky. Now, this one is a little bit interesting. Vandegrift was, he was a guy that hung around. He's been around the last 2 years, I believe, for Georgia. He was one of the top quarterbacks in the 2021 class or 22 class, if I'm not mistaken. And he was a former 5-star player. And now he is leaving Georgia and he's going to Kentucky. So this one's very interesting. What are your thoughts on this?
It's an interesting move to leave Georgia and stay in the conference. I like this for Kentucky. Devin Leary was kind of just the textbook definition of game manager. I mean, just nothing. I mean, yeah, they did beat Louisville to end the year, but nothing about him scared me. Vandegrift scares me, man. And if he can reach that 5-star potential, that could bode very well for Kentucky, because I'd say they put some guys out, like obviously Will Levis, but outside of that, what was it? I'm going to get it, Tim Couch. So Kentucky's not known for really putting quarterbacks out there. So with a schedule composed, since the SEC is so bougie and can't announce a schedule before December 16th, with a schedule composed of Auburn in their second year, Georgia, South Carolina, and Vandy, and that's at home. UF, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Texas. I like this. This could get Kentucky in their usual, in their not usual, but in their newfound 9-win range that they've been doing under Stoops. So I'd say outside of the what I said, did I say Rogers was my favorite? I probably like this one second because I think it's a good move for Vandegrift and a good move for Kentucky, who is recruiting the athletes and I think has a favorable schedule to do well next season. So I definitely like it. And he was not going to see the field at Georgia. So now he'll get his opportunity when he faces off against them to show them what they potentially were missing out on.
Well said. And I think this is the perfect example of that trickle down effect. You know, there's a market out there for these middle tier Power 5 programs like Kentucky. There's going to be a lot of guys that are highly rated recruits that just don't pan out at Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State. And those guys may not necessarily see the field there, but man, they still got that talent. There was a reason they were high 4 stars and 5 stars coming out of high school. And now they just get a chance to play at, you know, a school like Kentucky and sort of shine there. I mean, I'll take Bo Nix, for example. It didn't pan out at Auburn, then goes to Oregon, and he was a Heisman finalist. So you never know. There's always a market out there. And I think this is a perfect example of that with Brock Vandegrift going to Lexington. Next up, Tyler Shuck. He has left Texas Tech. This is his second time transferring. That man just keeps heading east, man. He went from Oregon to Texas Tech. Now he's going to Louisville. Now, I'm not going to lie. This one surprised me because Louisville has been in the mix for a handful of quarterbacks. And of all the ones, I'm a little surprised that they ended up going with Shuck. But there's still more to come here with the portal. I don't know if Louisville, I don't know if they're done yet looking for quarterbacks. Is Shuck the guy there? What are your thoughts on this one? Is he for sure the guy for Louisville next season?
So I haven't done this, but I want to give this B minus C. I mean, and maybe I'm salty because Texas Tech was not the darling I thought they were going to be this year, and he was hurt though. I mean, he had nothing. I mean, he was hurt, but with Shock, he's transferred twice. He's got injury history, and yeah, I mean, Louisville made the ACC championship with Jack Plummer, but let's not be ignorant. We know it's because the schedule was Charmin soft, and I think having to play a much tougher schedule next year may yield a different outcome. I still think Louisville's shopping. I think they'll have a competition, and hopefully for Ty, he doesn't get a Spencer Sanders here. But it's not a move that wows me. But I'll say what I say with Brosmer. Like, I don't hate it. I mean, because he is a serviceable quarterback, and I do feel like we maybe don't know what he is yet with the injuries. But at the same time, I am curious with the market if Louisville maybe could have pulled in maybe just a little bit more of a marquee name.
100% agreed there with everything you just said. As far as the move itself for Shuck, I'd say, like we said last week, if you're Shuck, Plummer, or not Plummer, what am I thinking? Braum. Braum is the guy that you want to play for if you're a quarterback.
Yes.
And hey, if he ends up being the guy there, that's a good career move for Tyler Shuck.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that. So, yeah. But, yeah, just Jack Plummer won't be his coach. So let's not get that mixed up there. It's Jeff Braum is the coach, not Jack Plummer. All right. Kyle McCord. Now, listen, Ohio State fans, you will be the first ones to admit McCord was definitely a major downgrade from CJ Stroud.
Midcord.
I think we all saw that one. I mean, listen, and considering listen, they were upset last year. Like that team, like they were upset at Stroud last year for not winning those games. It's like, man, look at what Stroud's doing in the NFL this year, and then look at what McCord has done this year. And it's like, you're to tell me that CJ Stroud was part of the problem. He was not part of the problem, man. But yeah, Kyle McCord, he's leaving. And this is recently, as of today, him and Julian Fleming, which is even double intriguing, but we're only talking quarterbacks today.
Heck of a combo.
Julian Fleming is in the portal as well, but Kyle McCord, as of today, we know that there was rumors that he was meeting with Nebraska along with Fleming. And now, as of today, 24/7 has a 100% prediction on McCord going to Nebraska. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, Shub, with McCord, I want to make sure I'm remembering this right. Their their only loss was to Michigan at the end of the year. Almost lost to Notre Dame, but he led a gutsy drive to win it at the end. And I'm looking at Nebraska's schedule, and I'm not trying to get two win totals here, but I do think who you play is relevant based on the quarterback you have at the helms.
Oh, it absolutely
Assuming
is.
this is not Jeff Sims disastrous, this can work out really well for Nebraska. You bring in a five-star quarterback. Here are your toughest games. I'm not kidding. I don't think there's any tough games till after their first bye. And Colorado's on the schedule, but we're not that type of pod. We're not going to say that Colorado's a tough game or anything like that. And it's at home. So skipping that part, they play at Ohio State. At Ohio State,
Ooh.
October 26th.
Oh boy.
Then UCLA comes in, which who knows what UCLA is going to even look like next year. Then another bye week to prepare to go play the USC Trojans, and then you end with Wisconsin and at Iowa, and I think both of those may not be these formidable monster teams that they have been in the past. So I say all that to make the point of if they can land McCord and even potentially Fleming, but we're talking about McCord here, this could be a really special 2024 for Nebraska. Because Matt Rule has shown time and time again what he can do. And this will probably be, unless I'm misremembering, this will probably be the best, most talented quarterback he's had in his collegiate coaching tenure, unless I'm not thinking of somebody. Between Temple and Baylor, right? It would easily be the most talented. So I think this, I'd start looking at that Nebraska win total. I'd be leaning kind of over, depending how some things shake up. If they can land McCord and if he unlocks that 5-star potential.
And Fleming for that matter. But yes,
Absolutely.
I don't want to go to win. I don't want to be win totals focused here because we are talking about the portal, but you kind of have to think that way. I'm with you. You look at that schedule, you look at Ohio State next year. I mean, what is Ohio State right now? Ohio State doesn't have a quarterback. Like, there's a lot of unknowns with Ohio State right now. And then look at USC. USC just thought is going to lose Caleb Williams. They're looking for a quarterback in the portal because they're not 100%, banking on Malachi Nelson. I look at this schedule, UCLA, as you mentioned, a lot of unknowns there. I see the schedule right now for Nebraska. Gone. This is sneaky. There's some sneaky upside here, man. And there is some sneaky opportunities for Nebraska to clip some teams that I think have some uncertainty. Now there's a lot to play out here, but yes, I'm totally with you. This is a very good buy low move if Kyle McCord does go to Nebraska. And you're right, based on the schedule, this team has some sneaky upside with McCord next year. Totally with you there.
I think you said it perfect there.
Yes, it definitely makes me a little bit intrigued. And Nebraska, I think, definitely would be one of those like sneaky dark horse win total over teams going into 2024. I can already see it. All right, last on our list for today, DeQuan Finn. Now, he's the only guy on this part of the video that does not have a portal prediction or hasn't committed yet. So DeQuan Finn, he is a clean slate as far as we know of. He is a clean slate. He's in the portal, and he can go literally anywhere. DeQuan Finn, he's a guy that we talked about a lot with Toledo. If you follow G5 football, you know he's a good player. He's a good dual threat quarterback as well, and he is definitely capable of starting at a Power 5 program, and that's what he's hit the portal, and that's what he's here to do. So I'll be very interested to see what kind of market there is out there for DeQuan Finn and how he does. So yeah, what's your thoughts on DeQuan Finn and what type of school do you think would be a good fit for him?
So looking at Mr. Finn's background here, he's from Detroit. And part of me thinks he'll stay in the Big Ten footprint. And I think if we're keeping that in mind, some options, wouldn't that be something if Cignetti landed him in his first year and you get to, start your Indiana rebuild with DeQuan Finn at the helm? But honestly, with McLeod transferring, I'm curious if if that would even pan out. Rutgers could absolutely use any kind of quarterback. If you can get to Quan Finn with a salty Rutgers defense, you're going bowling again next year. Absolutely. I'm staying in there. If Wisconsin, if they took a gamble on him with this, with they keep trying to implement their new passing attack and their new offense, and definitely not Iowa. Nope. For his sake, do not go there. Stay far away. Ignore the voodoo. You don't want anything to do with that. And then Illinois. Oh, now Illinois would be a lot of fun. That'd make me think of little Kenyan peoples
Yep.
for the culture right here. Oh,
Yep. That's right.
It'd be cool, but no, I and I think Paddock is like a 5th-year senior or whatever. I don't think he's even able to come back. So it'd be interesting to see. So what I'm getting at here is I think he goes to the Big Ten. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe somewhere out west they pluck him. But I think given where he grew up, where he played a lot of his ball, I just see him regionally staying in the Big Ten, and I'm intrigued to see if I'm even remotely close on that.
Well, you are very correct in terms of the footprints, but based on the odds that I'm looking at right now, Sports Betting Online AG, they have some odds as to what DeQuan Finn's next team will be. And again, this is just a Sports Betting AG odds prop for DeQuan Finn's next destination. And these are the top 5 teams that they have as betting favorites right now for DeQuan Finn.
Let's hear them.
Number 1, Michigan. Number 2, Ohio State.
What?
Number 3, Wisconsin. Number 4, Michigan State. Number 5, UCLA. And number 6 is USC. So literally all Big Ten schools.
Wow.
Because USC and UCLA are Big Ten schools now.
I apologize for my disrespect. I didn't think like Michigan and Ohio State would be trying to take Toledo's quarterback.
I went through the same thoughts in my head, man. I did not think that he was a Michigan or Ohio State level quarterback. I was with you. I was like, DeQuan Finn at Wisconsin would be filthy. I would love that. I could see that as the perfect sweet spot. But again, this is just a random sports books betting odds. So, we can only put so much credence into that. But yeah, that is very interesting, man. Listen, all I got to say, if Ohio State, if they don't land Cam Ward, I don't know. DeQuan Finn might be your next best option if you're Ohio State. So,
yeah,
he might hit the lottery here. He might just hit the lottery.
And I'm curious if Michigan, because they're really trying to recruit one of the top quarterbacks, Bryce Underwood. I'm curious, and he's committing on January 6th. So I'm curious how quick DeQuan's decision will come, or if we'll see it come after Bryce Underwood makes that commitment and things kind of shape out for at least in the Michigan quarterback room. So really intriguing. I think whoever gets him gets an absolute gem, though. He has made Toledo relevant. He won a MAC championship, appeared in another one. I think he adds value and veteran leadership and just a great player to wherever he decides to go to.
So I'll give no inside sources, nothing, just pure not blind, but pure speculative guess. I say DeQuan Finn goes to Wisconsin. That just seems to DeQuan Finn at Wisconsin. That just seems to ring a bell to me. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But you're definitely right. It's that Big Ten footprint. It's looking like more likely than not that's where he's going to end up next year. So that'll be very interesting to follow, man. That's another that'll be another hot transfer portal recruitment to follow. So we have gone through some of the transfer portal players, the quarterbacks that are in. We're going to talk a little bit about position players, future pods going into the offseason. There's just going to be a lot to talk about. There's going to be a lot of time to talk about all the other positions. There's a lot of players like Walter Nolan, Julian Fleming, a lot of non-quarterbacks that are important to talk about. But, quarterbacks, first and foremost, most important position on the field. But now, man, it is time to transition to something that I know this is your bread and butter. This is Gonzo's sweet spot on the baseball bat right here. Head coaching hirings. And we are going to be grading all of these on A+ to F scale, just like grading school, just like in elementary, high school. We're going to grade these schools based on the hire. We're going to grade them in terms of the actual hire itself, the candidate themselves, and the process to which they came to that hire. So there's a couple ways to look at this, a few ways to take it in, but me and Zan have already gone ahead and put out a few videos. Actually, we've graded Jonathan Smith and Jeff Lebby. So Gonzo, for the sake of record keeping here, we need a grade out on Jonathan Smith going to Michigan State and Jeff Lebby going to Mississippi State. I almost got those mixed up there.
So I promise I'm not letting y'all influence me, but for Jonathan Smith, that's an A plus. I mean, you get a Big Ten job. That's a huge payday. You have a chance to make them competitive. You were competitive at Oregon State. You get to bring your prize quarterback recruit along with you, we assume, at least. I think he's going to recruit well. I think he's going to be able to get them out of this hole that Mel Tucker put them in. And fortunately, it doesn't seem to be a ramification that is going to set the program back like a decade. I think it's a fantastic hire, and I think you will see Michigan State competing for playoff spots sooner rather than later.
We have 3 A+ ratings for Jonathan Smith across the board here. That has never happened on this podcast.
Summa cum laude for Mr. Smith. Congratulations. We'll give you your diploma at the end of the month.
No kidding. I wanted to give him an A originally, but I was like, if I'm not going to give this an A+, then what am I going to give an A+? Because this is like the best you can possibly do. So yeah, the Saturday Scholars are very, very high. We think it is without a doubt that Jonathan Smith will be successful at Michigan State. This is an A+ across the board, and we're pretty picky. So we do not give out A+. In fact, I don't think there'll be a single A+ given out the rest of this hiring season. But hey, right off the bat, that's a home run. That is a grand slam for Michigan State with Jonathan Smith. Guaranteed success there, in our opinion. How about Mississippi State hiring Jeff Lebby? I gave it a B+. Zan gave it a B-.
So I'm gonna give it a B-. This is Jeff's first head coaching job. You got the distraction with his father-in-law, Art Briles, and I think that's a minor thing, though. I think the reality is Jeff Lebby has never coached at any level as a head coach because he's been OC all over the place, and he's a heck of a coordinator. But I'm curious if this is a lieutenant, not a general situation of your first head coaching gig is in the SEC and Mississippi State, and you got to pitch people to come to Starkville. I would be surprised if he lasts more than 4 years. This definitely seems like a scramble hire because Zach Arnett was not it, and it's a terrible situation because Mike Leach was basically supposed to retire there. And I'm not going to beat that drum, beat that horse. It breaks my heart every time to think about it. It's a mid-hire. There we go. If you want it in plain English.
I was going to say that seemed like more of a C- or D hire based on the way that you're describing it. But yeah, I guess I'm the one that's given them the highest grade. I gave it a B+, which maybe is a little too generous, but
I like his ceiling, maybe 8 wins. It just based on the landscape.
That's an A for Mississippi State. If you're going 8-4 at Mississippi State, you get an A as a coach. Like that's the way you got to look at it.
Well, maybe I'm a very gracious grader, but it's underwhelming to me. But again, who would you have gotten at Mississippi State? So I think it works for them, but again, kind of just underwhelming. No, okay, retroactive. We're making this a C. Yeah, we're making this a C. I think average is more fitting. I think a little bit of the group thought got to me there. No, this is a C for me. In all respect, I mean, I like Miss State. I like Jeff Lebby, but I just think in the landscape of the sport, somebody has to take the losses if you take the checks.
You were right about that. Well, I gave it a B+ because I think he can take the check and he'll take the losses. But I think they can run that offense and implement it there. The only reason I didn't give it an A is because, well, he has been a coach. So yeah, there's I'm definitely the high man on that one. But I do like the direction of the hire in terms of running an offense that is different and hard to defend in the SEC at Mississippi State. So that's the main basis behind my grade. Then Zan, he's right in the middle of us with a B- on Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State. All right, so now we are going full clean slate here. Texas A&M hiring former Duke head coach and former Texas A&M defensive coordinator Mike Elko. Now, if you've listened to this podcast, if you've seen our shorts, you've seen our content, you already know we like this one a good bit here, but we never gave this one an official grade. So it is a time to officially grade Mike Elko to Texas A&M. What do you got here?
As an LSU fan, I hate it, which means it's an A plus. An A. It's an A. Well, it's an A. How about that?
I like that. As if you were an LSU fan, if
gonna
you were a rival fan and you hate the hire, that means it's a good hire. That's a great way to put it.
he's gonna he's gonna fix the culture. It may be hard for him to stop the exodus because those are Jimbo's guys, and some of them are bag chasing, some are just looking for other opportunities. But he knows what it takes to be successful there. He knows how the culture works there. He especially knows how the culture works there and their very unique traditions and what makes Texas A&M Texas A&M. If you can make Duke competitive, and honestly, you should have won 10 games this year, and I'm still mad about that. If you can make Duke competitive and beat Clemson and have game day showing up and create hype around Riley Leonard as a defensive coach, by the way, who had a good quarterback, then imagine now coming back to A&M and all the resources. I think he's absolutely going to kill it. And I think finally, especially in this expanded playoff realm, A&M can finally get a taste maybe of that playoff they've been craving, which they thought that Jimbo would get for them. And I like I'm happy they didn't go Urban Meyer. Sometimes you don't need to go flashy. Sometimes you just need to get somebody who gets it and will implement it. So that's my thoughts on Mike Elko. Fantastic hire for the Aggies.
So you give it an A. Well, I was thinking about this and I was teetering between an A to A minus. And I mean, let's be real here. What's the difference? I'm going to give it an A. So not to be boring here, I'm going to give it the same grade. The only reason I'm not giving this one an A plus is because Mike Elko was only at Duke for 2 seasons. So it is literally me nitpicking the hell out of this right here. With Jonathan Smith, we saw him build Oregon State from a 3-4 win program his first few years to an 8-9 win team his final 2 years there. So we got to see that build over time at Oregon State. 2 years at Duke, it is still somewhat of a smaller sample size, but that is just me nitpicking. For every other reason in the world, this is a fantastic hire for Texas A&M, and we also are kind of cheating here because we kind of have got to see some of the coaching staff that they're putting together. I know that Elko hired Colin Klein recently, Kansas State's offensive coordinator, to be the new OC, though, to be the new OC there. That's a good hire. Yes. I like the coaching staff they're putting together. For every other reason in the world, this is an A. This is a great hire for Texas A&M. Like this is a fantastic hire for A&M. So A's from both you and me. Now this one, who thought we'd be great in this one at the beginning of the season? Northwestern has promoted interim head coach / sitting defensive coordinator David Braun to head coach. This man went 7-5, inheriting a roster and a team, a program that was in dismay after Pat Fitzgerald was, in my opinion, wrongfully let go for some of that hazing scandal stuff over the offseason. And this program looked like it was in shambles. Their win total was just 3. They were expected to only be a 2-3 win team. And we were like, yeah, they'd be lucky to win 3 games. Well, this man just went interim coach and went 7-5. Second in the Big Ten West. And you know what he also did? He won Big Ten Coach of the Year. David Braun, Big Ten Coach of the Year as an interim. So they said, for all the right reasons, hey, you're going to be our new head coach. Man, this is a heck of a story, man. I know it's Northwestern. They don't get a lot of love and attention, but this is a heck of a story in and of itself that's not getting a lot of love from national media. But what are your thoughts on this? What's your grade on this hire?
Like, I have to try and bifurcate the story of 2023 into the future in formulating this grade. And with all that in mind, I will go and give it an A minus. A minus. I'll give them the lowest A I can. Because, I mean, who else are you going to attract to come to Northwestern? Like you said it all. This man did a lot with nothing in a crazy situation over there. And I think it just makes sense. Like, I don't know, outside of maybe a G5 coach trying to land a payday, who else would seriously have taken a Northwestern job and then taken it, with an expectation of, oh, I'll be successful here, sure. Which I guess every coach thinks, but I know in the back of their mind, some of them are like, yeah, I'll just get paid. And, if they fire me in 3 years, whatever. So I think for Northwestern, the expectation should be a bowl game, maybe upset a big dog every now and then, and see how your schedule plays out with the Big Ten West eroding into nothingness now, unfortunately. So all in all, I think it is a fantastic hire for the Northwestern Wildcats.
You're giving it an A minus now. David Braun, he was the former defensive coordinator at North Dakota State from 2019 to 2022. So calling the plays for pretty good defense at the FCS level, won a few national championships as well. So I don't know. This guy, based on the sheer record from the Northwestern this year, this guy can coach, and it was a difficult situation. So I gave him all that praise and everything. I'm going to give this a B plus. And here's why. I'm not giving it an A, and that is kind of the same line of thought that you had there, Gonzo. Listen, one season is not a big enough sample size to say whether or not this guy is for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, a good coach or not. We all know that. I mean, Ed Orgeron won a national championship and went 15-0, had one of the greatest seasons ever as LSU head coach. And you tell me from that season, would you say he's a great head coach? No. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Perfect timing there. For those of you listening, Gonzo held up his, he's got Coach O on his shirt right now. That couldn't have been any better. Christmas sweater. But yeah, you get the point here. But I will say, in terms of the process to get this hire, you hit the nail on the head right there. Who else is Northwestern going to get? It makes total sense to just promote a guy from within that is competent and could compete and win games towards the bottom of the Big Ten at that level, and that's what he did. So in terms of the process, I like it. In terms of the candidate itself, it's pretty promising, but 1 year sample size is not enough for me to say, oh yeah, that's an A. So I'm going to give it a B plus, just about as good as you can possibly do with small sample size. I give it a B plus, Gonzo an A minus. But yeah, that's a hell of a story right there, man. And, it did feel a little icky for me not giving it an A, but, especially with the story and everything, but we'll see.
I mean, honestly, I almost feel like I overvalued it, but to win Big Ten Coach of the Year over, well, I guess Harbaugh was never going to win it now with all that going on, but over the usual suspects, I think it's an absolute fantastic feat. And again, like, it's an under I'm happy to miss on. Like, seriously good for Northwestern.
Absolutely. Hey, somebody had to give it an A minus and you gave it to him. So I'm happy that one of us did it. All right, next up, Syracuse has hired former Georgia defensive backs coach Fran Brown as their new head coach. This one definitely an interesting hire. There are a lot of candidates that were in the mix for this job. Fran Brown, he was ranked the number 8 recruiter in the country, according to 24/7 Sports, and I talked a little bit about this one last week. And he's also a New Jersey native. So Fran Brown, he's known for being a great recruiter, great relationships guy, and he's also familiar with the Northeast. I mean, he's from New Jersey, so he's got that background. That's his backyard up there. So you can kind of see this is the direction that Syracuse wanted to go here with this hire. So what's your grade here?
So in formulating this grade, I'm looking back at Dino Baver's track record. And Dino ultimately finished, 41-55 and, had actually 2 winning seasons. And with hiring Fran Brown here, I will go with a B minus. It doesn't wow me. I kind of thought Dino, I mean, he's coming off of, a bowl, making a bowl game last year, and then you fire him this year. I kind of saw no reason to really fire him. Now, I don't know what's going on internally at Syracuse, and I won't even pretend to know. And I mean, Fran Brown's got the experience and he's a recruiter, and that's awesome. But what's the future of the ACC really looking like? And how serious is Syracuse trying to take things right now? He may be able to recruit, but will he be able to retain? And it's his first head coaching job. And it's just one that doesn't blow me away. He comes from a great, staff with being under Kirby, and hopefully he can be a successful assistant as he now paves his head coaching career. But really, I just have nothing tangible to really look at to determine his track record. So that's why I think what did I said a B. That's why
B
a B minus.
minus.
That's why I think a B minus is appropriate, because maybe his ceiling is absolutely huge, and he's gonna make Syracuse competitive in the next few years. Or maybe it's an absolute bust and they're doing this all again in 4 years. So really, I just don't know.
So I'm going to give this a C minus.
I like
Now,
it.
I'm giving this a C minus because, listen, I look at this from the candidate himself and the process by which the school, the university, the athletic director / department got to this hire. The candidate himself, Fran Brown, I understand the direction that Syracuse was going in terms of, hey, we're going to get a guy that we know that can recruit. Syracuse is a very hard place to recruit at, and that's one of their biggest obstacles is just getting good players in the door in the facility. That being said, it's still Syracuse. Realistically, if you are a phenomenal recruiter, how much better of a player can you get in the door with Fran Brown versus Dino Babers? Now, you may be able to get some better players in the door, but are you going to get players to the point where you are like seriously raising the talent level of your program? Or is the difference going to be marginal? Now, if the difference is marginal, that's good. You're getting slightly better recruiting classes every year, but the question is, here's the whole thing with my grade here. There's risk in this hire. Fran Brown's never been a head coach anywhere. Like this is a huge risk here. How is Fran Brown going to be as a CEO, as the head football coach somewhere? Like he hasn't called plays. He wasn't the coordinator anywhere. Like we don't know what type of hires is he going to make. How is he going to be just as a head football coach, a CEO? I mean, he may end up being phenomenal. I may eat my words here, but as of right now, this just seems like a huge risk for me. And at a place like Syracuse, you can't really afford that. So I would have rather personally, if I was Syracuse, I'd rather go for the X's and O's guys that I know is proven that can run a program. And that's part of the reason for my grade. The other reason is, man, there are some great candidates that were also in the mix for this job. I know Dan Mullen was in the mix for this job, potentially Bob Chesney, the Holy Cross head coach. I think either of those would have been great hires for Syracuse. I was slightly surprised to see they went this direction. And listen, there's a reason we're grading this because we don't know. He's the Fran Brown tenure at Syracuse has not started, but as of right now, in terms of judging the process by which they got to hiring the coach and the candidate himself, as of today, I give it a C minus. There's just a lot of risk with this, and I don't know if this is the correct direction to go at a place like Syracuse, but that's just me.
Hey, it could be a Dan Lanning or a Mike Bobo. I would say those are two very good spectrums to look at this at.
I like that. That's the Dan Lanning, the Mike Bobo spectrum.
Mhm.
I like that. All right, next up is Oregon State, who has promoted defensive coordinator Trent Bray to head coach. Trent Bray, he was a former Oregon State linebacker from 2002 through 2005. He was also the linebackers coach at Oregon State from 2018 to 21. And then he was the DC, of course, the last 2 seasons. And you know what? Trent Bray also, he very briefly served as the interim head coach for Nebraska back in 2017. I don't know if many people realize that. So he was interim head coach for Nebraska and that staff in 2017, very briefly. So Trent Bray is he's been around the block, and he's held multiple roles at Oregon State, was a player there, he's an alum. So he's kind of Jonathan Smith 2.0, or at least if you're an Oregon State fan, you kind of hope he is Jonathan Smith 2.0. So what are your thoughts on this hire, and what's your grade for it?
Looking at Trent Bray's track record, which you laid out perfectly, but I'm just looking at his whole coaching tenure. And let's go D plus for defense, because you're telling me this is the best Oregon State could do was promote their defensive coordinator. I get that he's an alum. I get that he's seen the program through its highs and lows, but this was one where I'm like you're not even going to try. Like, I get that Oregon State's Power Five status is kind of in a flux right now because it's only them and Washington State who make up a conference now. And I get that Mountain West competition is probably what it will be, at least for the immediate future. But you're telling me they could not have plucked one of the rising stars in the Mountain West or the Sun Belt or threw a bag at Summerall instead of Tulane doing it to bring him in? So nothing against Trent Bray, and he could do phenomenal there. But for me, and for my assessment, and for the guy that he's following, and for the exodus that is coming with Oregon State, and for the future of the program in general, I think this is a sign. I really think it's a sign of things to come. I would be very shocked to see Oregon State in a position of prominence in the near future, just given what happened to their conference and this direction they're taking with their head coaching hire. Because let me say this, shoot, if I'm an offensive stud quarterback, I'm not necessarily wanting to go play for a guy who's predominantly a defensive minded head coach unless he's just got an absolute rock star of an OC and a QB coach in that room.
Boy, Gonzo, Oregon State fans are going to be coming for your head in the comments. I can already see it right now. Boy, so I have a different take on this one. So my grade is actually going to be a B plus, and it's going to be a B plus for kind of the same reasons that you said. I just have a different spin on it. I think if you're Oregon State right now, I mean, yeah, you're right. What kind of coach on the outside is going to take this job right now? If you're Oregon State, Jonathan Smith totally just left you at the worst time. He left you when you were vulnerable and you were in a committed relationship, and he left you when you were at your most vulnerable. What type of person is going to take that job right now with the state that they're in? So to me, to get a guy that is a former player, an alum, a guy that has coached there in multiple roles before, that loves the program, that is the best case scenario, in my opinion, because that kind of is the best thing that you could do. If anything, in the tumultuous time that Oregon State's experiencing right now as a program, you want somebody that actually loves the program, that has the connections, not somebody from the outside that doesn't really care about the program, that's just going to leave you in 3 years if they're successful. So from that perspective, I actually think Oregon State, this was like the best case scenario for them, was having a guy like Bray internally that you could promote to head coach to sort of steady the ship while it's going through some rough seas right now. So I give it a B plus, and it's not an A because obviously there's huge risk here. Trent Bray's never been a head coach, so he may fail as a head coach. There's a lot of guys that, he was a good defensive coordinator. Some guys were just, they're meant to call plays. They're meant to be coordinators, but they can't run programs. They're just not meant to be head coaches. We see that a lot. Manny Diaz, who we'll get to later, he's a good example of that. So from that perspective, I think it's a risk. That's why it's not an A. But in terms of the process by which Oregon State needed to get to this hire, I think this is the best that they could have done. So that's a huge reason why I'm giving this a higher grade, is because of everything that I just said. You need somebody that loves the program right now to steady the ship. And I think that's what Trent Bray does for Oregon State. So that's why I'm going to give it a B plus.
It could very well work out. I just, by default, am not the biggest fan of the internal promotion, but I say that, LSU promoted and he won a title. So that doesn't say it doesn't work, but I guess it's more just me personally. I'm a bigger fan of casting a net, but you raise valid points of sometimes it's just better to go in-house to get a guy who gets it. So we'll see what it holds for Trent Bray and Oregon State. I'm by no means rooting for him to fail or anything like that. I'm just not wowed by the hire myself.
If Oregon State wasn't in the current state that it is, if it was in different circumstances, then I probably would agree with you more. But because of where Oregon State football seems to be going right now, that's why I think it is a solid hire. But yeah, Absolutely. Good points on both sides here. So if you're an Oregon State fan, please be respectful, but let us know your opinions in the comments. We know you guys blew up our other video that we made, so let us know what you guys think about this one.
I'm saying I've been preaching build the dam the last 2 years. So
oh, you have. We've been an Oregon State pod, so you Beavers fans out there, if you're coming in the comments and hating on us, just know we've been Oregon State. We've been Oregon State cheerleaders for the last 2 years. So yeah. Anyways,
I still think they can do well against a Mountain West schedule. I mean, I'm intrigued to see, just from a national perspective, if the Beavs can stay relevant. That's all.
So next up is former James Madison head coach Curt Cignetti is going to Indiana. We made a short about this one. What are your thoughts, and what is your grade on this hire?
I'm gonna hand out the vaunted A+. I absolutely love it. I mean,
A+.
He's
wow.
He's coached at 4 different institutions. He actually coached at Alabama. I did not realize that. He was wide receivers coach and recruiting coordinator for good old Nick Saban. And he took James Madison and made them the best team in the Sun Belt from day one. And they're going to win their bowl game. Like 8,000,000,000%, they're going to win their bowl game. So honestly, essentially won 2 de facto Sun Belt championships. And now you're going to Indiana, who apparently has shown that they actually are going to care about football to an extent. So if they could just give this man like a just modicum of resources, Indiana can go from doormat to fighting with Northwestern to be a bowl team at 6-6, and maybe, snipe the big dogs. I think Cignetti is a phenomenal coach. He's got it in his blood from his daddy and his brother, OC at Pitt, if I recall. I think it's an absolutely great hire. The man knows how to win and build programs, and Indiana definitely needs that kind of guy who can build a program. So that's why I think Cignetti is an absolutely phenomenal hire. Is one of my favorite of the cycle.
I love it. So my grade is going to be an A. I'm not going to give it the A+. I want to reserve the A+ for just cream of the crop. I like coaches that I think without a shadow of a doubt will not fail. This is pretty close, man. You had me leaning for an A+ there, but I'm going to stick with an A. And for all the same reasons that you said, I mean, the guy just wins everywhere. Like, I'm seeing kind of shades of Kalen DeBoer here. Like, this guy just wins wherever he goes, and that sticks. That stuff sticks. He won at freaking Elon. He won at Elon, and then he won at James Madison, took them up to the FBS level, and still won at the FBS level. In fact, should have had, or potentially, I should say, could have had 2 Sun Belt championships in his first 2 years if the NCAA didn't screw JMU over. This is a phenomenal hire for Indiana. Phenomenal hire for Indiana. And if you're Indiana football now, you can at least hopefully expect to get to bowl games every year and maybe be that team that can pick off some of the big dogs towards the top, pull off an upset or 2 every year. And maybe if they put it together, man, in the new landscape of the Big Ten, if you get a good scheduling draw one year, you got a good quarterback, you have that, the stars align, like maybe you can see an Indiana team pull out a 9-3 or a 10-2 if they really, really get everything going and maybe get a shot at the college football playoff. I mean, that seems like far-fetched right now, but it could happen. I think if you have a type of guy, head coach that can help pull that off, like it is Curt Cignetti. So that's the sky's limit. The sky's the limit in terms of 10-2, but I don't want to say 12-0. But yeah, man, this is a phenomenal hire. The guy just wins wherever he goes. And if you're Indiana football, you're also committing more money towards NIL in the future here, which I saw. They're going to be committing $3 million towards NIL starting next year, or for this year starting next year. So that's good, is that they're starting to put more resources, energy, effort, attention into the football program. So yeah, great way to start that off is hiring Curt Cignetti. So A+ from Gonzo, that's an A for me. Willie Fritz is going to Houston. Houston has hired the former Tulane head coach. What are your thoughts on this one? I kind of know where we all sit. We've all been huge Willie Fritz fans on this podcast the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on this one, and what's your grade?
Okay. I'm gonna go A. It's not a plus. I don't want to sound ageist, but Willie's 63 for goodness sake. So this is kind of a you got like a you got a window to do this. I'd say it's an A. I'm looking at where Willie's coached, and I mean, he's won everywhere. It's the Kalen DeBoer effect again. I mean, he took Tulane to the Cotton Bowl and beat the Heisman winner. And then, was back in the conference championship again. And honestly, wasn't looking for another job. Maybe they would have won it. But that all aside, no, I think it's a great hire. I think the landscape of the Big 12 definitely allows Houston to be competitive immediately. I can easily see Houston winning this conference within the next few years. Just fantastic hire, coach who's been all over, has the experience, has the wins. I think this is fantastic for Houston, with my only caveat being that you got to do it now, because Willie might well coach till he's 80, but you just don't know. So, hit the ground running and get this guy a Big 12 title as fast as you can.
Amen right there. Yeah, this is a great hire by Houston. Great hire by Houston. Yeah, I did not think they would get him. I thought that maybe a school, maybe a little bit more prestige potentially could have gotten Willie Fritz. I know Fritz was talking about to Georgia Tech a year before, but Houston's a great landing spot for him. And yeah, I mean, Houston's got a little bit more upside than Georgia Tech right now, I would say, as a program moving forward. And yeah, man, in the new Big 12, like, it's open season out there, and you put together a good team and win some close games, you can win that league. And Willie Fritz can do that, man. Like you say, he just wins wherever he goes. I mean, the man was at Tulane for 8 straight years. That man was at Tulane for 8 straight years and built it into what it has been the last couple years. I am going to give this an A. Willie Fritz can just coach. And for the same reasons that you said, man, he's 63 years old. This will more than likely, I would imagine, be his final job before retirement. So, yeah, I mean, if you're Houston, you got a guy that's going to stick with you until he retires, and hopefully you build a team that can have a special season and win a Big 12 championship, make the college football playoff. I mean, that's what Houston's looking to do. And I think, just like we said with Indiana and Kurt Signetti, Willie Fritz is a guy that can accomplish that ceiling that we're talking about at Houston. So that this is a good hire. That's A's from both of us. Manny Diaz to Duke. Now, this one was one of the later hirings of this coaching cycle. So Duke, they lose Mike Elko. You bring in Manny Diaz. Now, Manny Diaz, man, I know there's a lot of opinionated thoughts about him, but now that time has passed and we've kind of let his tenure at Miami sizzle a little bit, I'll speak for myself personally. I have a little bit different a perspective on this man now as a head coach, but I want to hear your thoughts. And of course, what is your grade on Manny Diaz to Duke? Because this one's interesting.
So you got a situation where, Duke gets left at the altar like we all were expecting in losing Mike Elko. So, I mean, this is new for them because it had been Cutcliffe forever, it felt like. Then you get the new girlfriend with Elko, then she leaves you for another dude, and now you settle on Manny here. And it's his second time being a head coach, which is crazy because he had the Temple flirtation, but then, didn't take the Temple job, and the absolute fiasco at Miami. So that leads me to, I'm going to be nice to Manny and give him a B. I think he's a heck of a defensive coordinator, and it's his second legitimate chance to establish himself, because what Miami did to him was absolute BS. They went after the alum, the big name in Mario. Yeah, how's that working out? I mean, we don't know yet. I mean, all I know is, Manny
2
might have
years
probably
and we
kneeled the
kind of
ball
know.
against Georgia Tech.
Right.
And I think there's buying at Duke. There's money at Duke for sure. There's absolutely money. So I like this hire for Duke. I like that Manny gets a second chance at redemption. Duke stayed with the defensive minded head coach approach. If Manny can put a good staff around him, I don't think there's any reason why, again, we can't see like an 8-4 Duke, because honestly, with how Miami's playing, Miami's been comparable to Duke. So I think Manny will do well there.
I am pretty much with you on this hire, man. Yeah, I think the Manny Diaz tenure at Miami, I think he really got a bad rap because at the time it seemed like Miami was really underachieving with Diaz and they went and got Cristobal. And yeah, you're right. The way they handled that situation, Miami did, it was not the best way to handle it. But hindsight's 2020. But based on the Cristobal area, he's made based on the last 2 years of Cristobal, he's made Manny Diaz not look so bad in hindsight in the rearview mirror. And we know one thing's for sure. Manny Diaz is a hell of a defensive coordinator. Like that man is a hell of a defensive coach. We saw that with his defenses at Penn State the last 2 years. There's no reason to believe that he can carry the Elko defense that level of performance and carry that over with his regime there at Duke.
And he's only 49. He's young, man.
Yeah, he's still a young guy, of course. I'm going to tell you here, I wish I could differentiate, but this is the grade that I had in my head. I had a B, not a B minus, not a B plus. This is a B. It is not an A because still we did see him handicap to Miami a good bit. But at the same time, if you're Duke, I give this a B grade because you basically want to minimize the drop off from Elko to Diaz, which I think he provides a solid floor for Duke. And two, Manny Diaz is going to get time at Duke. He did not get time or patience at Miami. If he has time and patience on his side, I think he could get things going here at Duke. And that's why I'm going to give it a B. It's not an A, but it's not a C. It is a B. Overall, I'd say a good hire, not a great or an elite hire. And that's kind of how I view this one. But I think time has favored Manny Diaz pretty well here. We'll say that over the last few seasons. But I just want to say really quick, and I know we haven't talked about this yet because we're, time and everything, but there's no man on the planet that is more qualified to give a stamp of an NCAA 14 college football coaching carousel hire than Mr. Zach Gonzalez here, Gonzo, because this man's dynasties they're another realm. This man's dynasties that he has, they are another realm. If you like my dynasty with the Illinois dynasty on this channel, if Gonzo ever was able to have the time to make dynasties or a series about his coaching carousel, world in the 2040s and 50s, like it would, it's insane. It's like being in another alternate universe.
Kirby Smart, the Hawaii DC,
Oh my God.
is one of my favorites, man. And
you
just
you should see the algorithm.
I mean, oh man, like Sark at North Texas. I mean, just really sick stuff. Like,
yeah, you play that game and you go deep into that game. You go 20 seasons into the dynasty mode and you start seeing some crazy things, some crazy destinations for these coaches. And basically, the whole premise of this stamp here is the algorithm just gives no Fs. It gives no Fs. It just says if you're Urban Meyer, if you don't do well, you're going to accept the job as the offensive coordinator at Toledo. It just doesn't care. And that is an NCAA 14 type of hire, just something that just seems like that. Just no Fs were given. Now, of all the hires that we have had so far that we've covered today, I want you to say which one is the most NCAA 14 algorithm hire of this coaching carousel. I kind of have a lean in my head, but I want to hear your thoughts. And I can give you a 1A and a 1B if you so choose. But give me one and then maybe two if you think so.
So Manny Diaz to Duke, I would say is pretty NCAA.
You read my mind.
Good DC goes to Duke. And then honestly, one more. Man, like Jeff Levy going to Miss State is kind of NCAA too.
That does seem like an NCAA move right there.
Yeah. Because just the sitting head coaches in the game don't necessarily leave to go be other head coaches. It's usually the coordinators who do it. So that's why I think those two probably fit the NCAA 14 coaching carousel. I'll go the best.
Man, you nailed it perfectly in my mind. I definitely had Manny Diaz going to Duke as number one in my list. when that hire was first made, I was like, this seems like NCAA 14 algorithm right here. But hey, we gave it a B. So I gotta say, if we're gonna give that a B, that's pretty good. But anyways, thought that'd be a little fun. There's no man more qualified on this planet to give out that stamp of NCAA 14 Dynasty carousel algorithm approval than Mr. Gonzo here. All right. We've talked a lot today, man, but it is time to end the day with us, the Saturday Scholars, picking the 12-team college football playoff. And we have gotten the bracket. Yes, of course, this is the last year of the 14 playoff, but we get to play Mr. Hypothetical here, and we get to pick what the 12-team playoff would look like if it was implemented right here, right now, today for the 2023 season. And, we'll get to see it for real life next year in 2024. But I thought it'd be a pretty fun exercise to go through this year and see who we think would win the college football playoff if we had the 12-team playoff format this season. Each of us is going to pick the games. We're going to have to agree on a winner for each game, and we're just going to fill out the brackets sort of March Madness style as we go. So are you ready for it, man?
I'm stoked.
All right, let's do it. So to start us off, this is the 12-team bracket right here. So we're going to go round by round per usual. Let's start at the top here with Oregon and Missouri. Now, this is a matchup that I think would be really fun. This is one of the benefits, I would say, of the new 12-team playoff format is that you're going to get some interesting first-round matchups, some not very interesting ones, as we'll get to. But this one, I think, is easily the most intriguing matchup based on what it would look like this season. And this is a pretty good Missouri team that is going to be going to Autzen to play Oregon, who would be hosting the first round. These teams, the higher seeds, they play at their home stadiums on campus. So what are your thoughts here on this game, and who do you think would win?
So Mizzou fans might lose their minds. I think this is Oregon playing like a sister of Washington. And I say that because Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, the weapons that Mizzou's got on Corey Schrader at running back, it's very similar to what Washington is running with like great running game, fantastic receivers. The only difference in those games is you don't have a Michael Penix. You got Brady Cook. And all respect to Brady Cook, but I think Oregon would have enough dialed up, and Dan Lanning would dial up enough to stymie Brady Cook. And with Bo Nix, I think that offense would I think Mizzou would kind of challenge them because they got a half decent defense, but ultimately I see Oregon winning this game more times than not. And then you add that it's in Autzen. I think they win a shootout. Oregon does.
Interesting. So we do have the benefit of being able to see what hypothetical point spreads would be on this. And this is me just doing the math based on the Sagarin ratings, but I'm with you. I think Oregon would win this matchup. I think Oregon is the better team, but this would be a damn good matchup here. And I'm guesstimating that the line would be Oregon favored by about 9 or so points, because you have to keep in mind there's home field advantage baked into this as well. So Oregon would be favored here by a little over a touchdown if it was to be played today at Autzen Stadium. And I'm with you. I think Oregon is just the better team, but this would be easily the best game for me. And I do think Missouri could pull off an upset here if they were to get a turnover or two. But with the way that Oregon's been playing and the way that Oregon is playing when they just don't play Washington, as long as the opposing team they're playing just doesn't have purple and gold uniforms, I think they'll be fine. Because Oregon has been a force outside of playing Washington. And I'm with you. I think Oregon wins this game, but Missouri would give them a run for their money. This would be a terrific first-round matchup. So we have Oregon moving on to play Michigan. But let's finish the rest of the first round here. We have Florida State, who in real life got snubbed from the 14 playoff, but in this format, they at least get to host a playoff game and they get a shot to play for the Natty. They would be hosting the 12 seed, the Group of 5 representative, the Liberty Flames. What are your thoughts on this one?
So is this with Brock Glenn at quarterback?
Well, we have to say hypothetically if it was implemented this year. So I would assume that Tate Rodemaker would have been healthy or would be
Okay.
healthy for this game if it was to be played this year. So
Okay.
we're going to assume Tay Rodemaker here is the quarterback for the Knowles.
So I kind of just did that to troll. It's not going to matter. I mean, that defensive line's going to maul Liberty. I mean, FSU's going to win this game. Like
Yes.
for goodness sakes. I mean, I'm taking Oregon to put up 50 on Liberty in the bowl game, and that's all respect. I got friends that went to Liberty. Like, I just think it's a different class of athlete. And you're telling me the CUSA champion is going to come in and win a playoff game? No shot. I think Florida State would win this game, even with Tate Rodemaker. I think they'd win it by multiple touchdowns, and I think Jared Verse would absolutely feast.
Yes. And I know everyone's been saying, oh, well, Florida State, they would have gotten blown out by Michigan. It would have been a blowout, yada, yada. Like, yeah, maybe it wouldn't have been a super close game, but I don't think it would be a blowout because of that defense. That defense alone can hold Florida State in these games against any team in the country. That defense for the Florida State was playing lights out, especially towards the end of the year. And I think a shutout would legitimately be on the table here if they played a team like Liberty in a home playoff game at Doak in the first round. I would see this being like a 24-27-7 type of game or something like that, where Florida State just sort of boa constricts them, wins by 2 or 3 touchdowns. So I'm with you. Even without Jordan Travis, this is a win for Florida State, mainly because of that defense. Now let's move over to the other side. Penn State versus Ohio State. Now, listen, this is a rematch. We already saw this one played in the regular season. I'm not really a huge fan of these rematches, especially if they're in the first round, but we saw this game and we saw it at the Shoe. So we get to see a rematch. We get to see Penn State, Ohio State at Ohio State 2.0. What do you think would happen here?
Bucks again. I mean, I have no reason to think that Drew Hour is going to be a different quarterback, especially in a playoff setting. And with Maserati Marv and Kyle Honda McCord and Fleming and all those guys, I think they'd win again. I think they'd win a hard defensive battle. And if you're Penn State, you're just really scratching your head like, why can't we just beat them or Michigan?
Yeah. So it's funny because if we had the 12-team playoff this year, I don't think Kyle McCord would be in the portal as of right
No.
now because he'd still have a chance to play for the national championship. But yeah, it's kind of funny. But anyways, Ohio State wins this game. I mean, we already saw this game played. We literally this exact game, this exact matchup, and this location is all the same. Like, we know what Penn State is. We know what Ohio State is. This would be probably another 7 to 10 to 14-point win for Ohio State in the Shoe. Like, 2 elite defenses, 2 mediocre offenses, but we know that Kyle McCord and Ohio State just have a little bit better of an offense. This would be a win for Ohio State. Like, we know what these teams are. Ohio State would probably just win a rematch in very similar fashion. Next up, what do you know? We got another rematch. We have Georgia versus Ole Miss. Now, a little bit more offensive firepower / caliber in this game. And listen, this is my one quarrel with this new 12-team playoff format. It's like these 2 games here on the right-hand side, we already saw these games in the regular season. Like, we already know what these teams are. Why do we need to see them be played again? I don't know. But you know what? Georgia beat Ole Miss by like 40 points in the regular season. And with the 12-team playoff format, we get to invite Ole Miss back to play at Georgia so Georgia can do it to them again. So, this is what we expanded the playoff for here. But listen, there's a lot of good to the 12-team playoff, but this is one of those things where I'm like, this is stupid. This is really stupid. But if I was the committee, I would imagine if this was actually to be in play this year, they would flip Ole Miss and Penn State. I think that for the sake of TV ratings, I think they would flip those. So that way you make Ole Miss go to the Shoe and you would make Penn State go
like
play
that.
between the hedges. See, that is way more intriguing to me. Like, personally, I already saw Penn State, Ohio State at the Shoe in the regular season. I already know what those 2 teams are like. I don't need to see that again. I wouldn't be that interested in that game. Georgia versus Ole Miss. What was the final score from the regular season?
They put 50 on them, didn't they? Or close to 50.
Whatever the final
It's like
score
50 to
was,
14. It was
yeah, it was
bad.
non-competitive. I wouldn't even watch this game. Why would I be interested in watching a rematch when we already saw what happened? But anyways, if I was a committee, I would flip those because Penn State going to play Georgia would be way more interesting to me. But anyways, that's my side rant. That's out of the way. But if we were to see this happen again, basically you got to tell Georgia, hey, we know you beat them by like 40 points in the regular season. Now you got to go do it again. Can they do it again?
So I think no, Georgia would win this game easily.
I think maybe Georgia would maybe take the foot off the gas a little bit earlier this time because they know who's lurking in the
Yeah.
next round, the next
They could
week.
probably
But
rest guys. I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
but listen, man, the 12-team playoff. Listen, it's gonna be fun, especially at first. But like, we expanded a little too much if we have teams like Ole Miss and Penn State getting in.
It, it's gonna be like March Madness. Like, oh, he's sick. We're so happy that, you know, gosh, think of a school. North Alabama. Oh, here we go. Middle Tennessee State beat Michigan State. Whoop-de-doo. Who's in the Final Four that year? Duke, North Carolina. It's always the blue bloods at the end. So they're taking a similar approach of, oh man, aren't you just so gnarly excited about this first round matchup? Oh my gosh, look at that. A 10 beat a 7. Oh man, who cares if they got smoked by 40 the next round? That first round upset was pretty nifty.
Yeah.
Preaching to the choir, I know. But
yeah. But, a majority of college football fans disagree with us, though, on that sentiment. So we'll see. Anyways, moving on to the quarterfinals here, Oregon versus Michigan. Now, this is where it really gets juicy. This quarterfinals round, this is where it gets juicy. So we had all of the higher seeds, all the home teams advancing in the first round. So now we get to see the 8 seed Oregon go play Michigan. Now, these are going to be played at neutral sites at the what are currently the New Year's Six bowl games. So Michigan would play this at their New Year's Six bowl sites of choice since they are the 1 seed. So what are your thoughts on this one? Now, this is a pretty dang good game, man. Oregon versus Michigan in the quarterfinals on neutral field. This one's tough.
It is. You got Michigan, who's got a just fantastic in the trenches, a good quarterback in JJ McCarthy. I know in the past I've kind of disparaged him, but he is a good quarterback, and Michigan's ceiling with him is much better than with really any of the guys they've had in recent memory. And skill guys like Blake Corum, Roman Wilson at wide receiver. And then Oregon's got Bo Nix and company and a good defense. I lean Oregon. Here's why, Shub. Oregon's been tested. In this reality, they lose to Washington, both in close games. One because of some coaching decisions and a missed field goal on the road, and then in the Pac-12 championship game where they just did not have the juice. But they took care of everybody else on their schedule. In Michigan, they're undefeated. They beat Ohio State. But I think the fact that Oregon has been tested would help them in this kind of matchup and allow them in the fourth quarter to reach in and pull the upset here. So I lean the Oregon upset. If you think Michigan and chalk holds, tell me why. And if it's enough, I'll change opinions for the sake of moving a winner. But I lean the Oregon Ducks.
This is tough. So in terms of a spread, I believe Michigan on a neutral field would be favored by about a field goal, give or
Sounds
take.
Right.
So in my mind, I view these teams as pretty much even in my head. The thing that I give the advantage to Michigan here is that, keep in mind, Oregon would have had to play a first round game against a pretty darn good Missouri team that we know would have given all hell. Yeah, that's a pretty good Missouri team there. And that's a physical Missouri team that they would have given Oregon all they could handle. So I'd give the advantage to Michigan here. But to me, in my mind, I see this as 50-50. I think Oregon could very well win this game. It's just a matter of, turnovers, etc., deciding this game. This is tough, man. Initially, I was leaning Michigan, but the more and more I'm thinking about this one, I see it as 50-50. I know you say lean Oregon. You know what? Screw it. If Zan was here, I think we all know which direction Zan would basically turn the tide one way here. We all know if he was here on this pod. Screw it. Quack quack, baby. We got the Ducks
That's
moving
right.
on to the semis, beating Michigan. Now, listen, before you go screaming in the comments that you hate this pick, listen, I think general consensus here, this is a coin flip. Like Oregon versus Michigan in the quarterfinals, this would be a hell of a game. I could see this one going either way, but we're gonna pick Oregon. But hey, Michigan, you have every argument in the world to say otherwise. This is tough. This is a tough one. All right. Alabama versus Florida State. Now, before we pick the winner here, I just want to say if this game was to be played in the first half of the season, I would pick Florida State. If you were to play this
Yeah.
game from the second half of the season, basically from like October on, I would say Alabama. And if you were to play this game in December or January 2023, I would say most definitely Alabama. So I think we know the answer here. But what's your say?
Yeah, it's Bama. FSU doesn't have the quarterback, and Jalen Milroe has continued to elevate, as a quarterback. And I just FSU wouldn't have the offense. Simple as that. And Nick Saban's more than fine to win the game 21-10 if he had to. So Bama would win this game. I'm curious what are you able to pull the spread just kind of for kicks and giggles on what this would be?
Yeah, it's tough because Florida State doesn't have Travis, of course, so you got to downgrade them. But I would guess in my best guesstimate is that I would say Alabama would be favored by maybe around 13, 14 points or
Wow.
something like that. But
Yeah.
that may be a little too much actually. Like I think anywhere between like 10 to 14 I think would be the range. That's my
So yeah.
best professional guess right there.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, bro, we know Bama would win this game.
Yes.
Like,
But I don't think it would be a blowout.
what?
Let it be known. I do not think
No,
this would be a
no.
blowout. Florida State's defense alone would keep them in the ball game. I do not think this would be a rout, but Alabama wins this game, fairly comfortably. So that sets up an
Yes.
Oregon versus Alabama semifinals. Man, that would be something. Either way, it'd be Oregon or it'd be Alabama versus Oregon, Alabama versus Michigan in the semis. So we got to finish the other half of the bracket here. We got Ohio State versus Washington. Woof, man. This quarterfinals, if this was to be played this year, this quarterfinals would be just absolute fire. This quarterfinals round, if this was
Yes.
implemented this season, this would be absolute fire. Ohio State versus Washington on a neutral field, of course. What do you got here?
So here you've got two good teams, marquee receivers, one who hadn't lost till playing Michigan. And for me, this is the better quarterback argument. Michael Penix is the better quarterback this year than Kyle McCord. And I think that would be enough for this high flying Washington offense to prevail over Ohio State. And so bark, Huskies.
So I think there's a good argument for Ohio State here, actually. So in terms of the spread, believe it or not, Washington would be a 4 to 6 point underdog, I think, in this
Okay.
game, which I know a lot of you listen. This has been a thing all year. Washington just hasn't been as highly rated by the computers. They've won a lot of one score games. They have beaten Oregon twice, which makes me think, maybe this team just kind of kicks it into gear against the elite teams. But the fact that Washington has beaten Oregon twice makes me think that they're a little bit better than this power rating suggests. But either way, Ohio State would be favored if you were to play this game right now on a neutral field. That's just a fact. That is an inarguable fact. Ohio State would be favored. But we play the games for a reason. This is tough, man. I think Ohio State could win this game. Like in my mind, I see this more as a 50-50 game. Ohio State's defense is top notch. It's an elite defense. I would love to see this matchup in terms of Ohio State's defense versus Washington offense, but I think I think Ohio State could very well pull this one off, but I would also expect Washington coming off of a bye. The way that they played against Oregon, I'm going to assume that they bring their A game. They bring their Oregon game, not their Arizona State or Washington State, not that game. They're going to bring their Oregon game, and they play like they do against Oregon. So maybe if they can see Ohio State come out in white and green and yellow uniforms, that would help. But either way, I think we're going to lead Washington here. But for those of you who think this would be an easy Washington win, I say proceed with caution because I could totally see Ohio State winning in this scenario. But we'll say Washington here for official record. All right. Texas versus Georgia. Man, this would be a good one. What are your thoughts on this?
I think Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck are comparable. You've got two defenses that are just well, I mean, okay, Ewers is better than Beck, but the way Beck's been playing
Really?
is like to the what? What?
I would flip that. I'd say Beck's a little bit better than Ewers.
Okay, okay. Well, either way, I think there's comparable quarterbacks, two elite defenses. Definitely a game that would be like 17-14, probably, or 20-21, you know, 21-24. I go Georgia, just the experience, the pedigree. This is Texas's first playoff game. They're gonna come out just super amped. But Georgia's been there. They know how to handle these situations. I mean, they've won with Stetson Bennett, and I think at the end of the day, they'd be able to do enough to overcome Texas because I do think Georgia losing to Bama in real life has skewed some things. Like, we cannot forget this is the two-time defending national champion right here, and you're going to put them here on as a 6 seed who just lost to Bama and had to get refocused. And just beat up on Ole Miss. I definitely do see them beating Texas more often than not.
Yeah, this one is one of the tougher ones I'd say, but I lean Georgia here, and I think this would be a very close competitive win that Georgia squeaks out. Um, yeah, for all the reasons that you said, on a neutral field, I think Georgia would be favored by maybe 1 point to 2 points. It would be really close. Like, this would be very close to a 50-50 game. Texas, keep in mind, Texas would have the extra rest here, but I think if you have Georgia playing Georgia's A game, which I assume that they would in a playoff scenario, I think Georgia wins this game. But this is one, like a lot of the other games that we've been picking in this playoff, like this could go either way. So I'll hear arguments for both sides here, but for the sake of this exercise, we'll pick Georgia to move on. So how about this? We got the semifinals here, and we got two Pac-12 teams and two SEC teams. How about that? So we got an all SEC, all Pac-12 semifinals here. So which conference will prevail? One of them has to. Both of them could, for all we know. We could have a rematch on. We could have an SEC rematch. We could have a Pac-12 rematch potentially. Boy, this gets tough. Oregon versus Alabama. Man, this would be a hell of a semifinal game. Honestly, I don't know what to do with this one. I see this Oregon Alabama matchup as like a 50-50 in my mind. This would be a phenomenal game. I don't know. Do you give an edge to one of these teams in this scenario?
Yes, I do. I give it to Oregon. Here's why. Everybody looks back on the Washington Pac-12 loss, and they forget that Oregon was smoking teams until then. Like, in the bookends of the Washington losses, Oregon was on an absolute tear. And at this point in time, I do think I'd rather have Bo Nix as my quarterback than Jalen Milroe, honestly. And when I think of Bama, I will not forget that literally Hugh Freeze not knowing how to call defense. That's why they're in the real life playoff. That's a big reason. And so I think in a coin flippy game, I pick Oregon. Bama could easily win the game. Milroe could easily run for 4 touchdowns. But I like Bo Nix at 35 years old. and Dan Lanning overcoming Nick Saban, but I can easily be convinced that it should be Bama for the sake of advancing somebody.
So I lean Alabama here very slightly. I lean Alabama by a field goal. But if Zan were here, where do you think Zan would go? I'm going to speak on his behalf. I think he would lean Oregon. So therefore, we can, I mean, this is our channel. This is our exercise. We can do whatever we want. I'll disagree with myself, and I'm going to say let's advance Oregon for the sake of the exercise. But listen, you get the point here. This would be a phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal banger 12-team playoff if this was implemented this year.
It would.
And that is by the fact of we're having a very hard time picking these hypothetical games. And normally when you go back and do this exercise in prior years, it's normally not this difficult because usually there's a lot more separation at the top of the sport. And it's a lot easier to say, oh, yeah, this team would win, this team would lose. Not this year. Not this year. And this is why we did this, because it is genuinely hard. Do it yourself and go through who you think would win. I have a hard time doing this. So let's say Oregon goes to the national championship, the same team that couldn't beat Washington twice. We're going to have playing for the national championship because, hey, luckily for Oregon, Washington's not on their side of the bracket. So, hey, this is how it works. Sometimes you just avoid the one really good team and you can make a run in this hypothetical playoff. That's the new format. All right. Washington versus Georgia. What do we have here? I have a fairly reasonable answer here. Tell me what your thoughts are. Or what do you view this one as?
Man, I keep liking that Washington offense, but then Georgia's Georgia. I mean, Georgia's got the depth. Georgia's got the talent. I think I have to argue that Georgia's more talented than Washington. And even though Kalen DeBoer is a winner, Kirby Smart real quick's become a winner himself, hasn't he? And so for the sake of just this exercise, I would have to go with the Georgia Bulldogs because I think they would be the one team who finds a way to shut down this Washington passing attack somehow and shut down Dylan Johnson too on the ground.
I'd feel pretty confident in Georgia winning this game, and that pains me because I've loved Washington all year, but this is where I think their road would come to an end. But yes, Georgia in a playoff setting is Georgia. Georgia would be Georgia in this setting. You have to keep in mind here, like we are assuming these teams in a playoff setting are going to be playing at their full strength. And yes, Georgia at its full strength is arguably the best team in all of college football. Just because they didn't win the SEC championship, just because they didn't beat Alabama in one game, a game in which they were playing injured and barely lost, that does not mean they are not the best team in the sport. And you have to assume in this format, you are getting the best overall version of Georgia. I like them to move on to the national championship and face off against Oregon. So now we have Georgia versus Oregon for the national championship. Two teams that didn't even make the 14 playoff in real life. We have two non-current 14 playoff members making the national championship. But hey, you know, this is the beauty of the 12-team playoff format, is that this can happen. And in a year like 2023, this could very well happen. In fact, I would not be surprised if this ended up being the actual way it plays out if we had the 12-team playoff this year, because of all the reasons we've said. I think in this matchup, this is tough for me. I have an answer here, but I want to hear your thoughts on this. This is also two teams playing for the national championship that didn't have a first-round bye. So neither of these two teams won their respective conferences. So we have two teams that were essentially at-larges making the national championship, which if you go back and you do this exercise in prior years, this like virtually never happens. But as we all know, 2023 was a unique year for the better. So just want to lay that out there and sort of paint the picture here. So Georgia versus Oregon for the national championship. Who do you think wins?
So my winner will prove the following, that in a 12-team format, you can rest guys and afford to take a loss because seeding is not going to matter if you're actually good. Sometimes it's better to just play on through than take a week off from playing, especially if you're hot. And sometimes it's okay to get knocked down, to humble yourself, because you come back harder than ever. And for that reason, shocker, I wish they would have done it for me in real life, but I am picking the Georgia Bulldogs to win the 12-team playoff. They are the more talented team. Dan Lanning, you probably play a closer game against your old boss than you did in Atlanta to start the 2022 season. But come on, Georgia's more talented. We could just hope this is not a 50-point blowout, and at least it's a watchable national championship.
No, it would definitely not be a 50-point blowout. This would be a good national championship game. I
think so.
I highly doubt it would be that way. This would be a great national championship. This would be a great 12-team playoff format outside of a handful of first-round games. But yeah, no argument for me.
Liberty with like SMU or Tulane, and I think you've like
right. But no argument for me. Georgia wins the 12-team playoff format this year. Listen, just because Georgia did not win the SEC championship and just because they did not make the 4-team playoff does not mean they are not the best team in college football. You know, listen, I know you just said, hey, the 12-team playoff proves that you can not necessarily play your best and lose a few games and still get in and win the Natty. Well, 2021, Georgia was able to do that in the 14 playoff. They were undefeated going into the SEC championship game. They didn't play their best. They slipped up and lost to Alabama in the SEC championship. And fortunately for them that year, they were still good enough to get into the 14 playoff, and they ended up winning the national championship. The only difference is this year, that team had a lot of other competition at the top that pushed them out of the 14 playoff field. So in my mind, you give Georgia that extra safety net and get them into the playoff, no matter what format it is, 18, 12 team, whatever, you get them into this dang playoff, they can very well go and win the national championship. And I agree with you. I think that's what would most likely happen. So case in point. But yeah, I think going back and doing this exercise, I'm pretty sure this is the only year that I can think of where none of the teams that made the real life 14 playoff we had playing for, yet alone winning the national championship. That's nuts. That's nuts. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of disagreement in the comments here, but let us know what you guys think. Let us know if you agree with our process for picking these teams. We think this would be a fun thought exercise. I know we may not be the only ones out here doing this on YouTube, but leave a comment. Let us know what your guys' thoughts are. I thought this would be fun, and it would be a good preview of potentially what to expect going into next year. And all we can hope for is that the field at the top of the sport is as good as it was this year. Man, I would have loved to see the 12-team playoff format this year. Other years, not so much, but this year it would have been an absolute banger. So let us know in the comments what your guys' thoughts are. Who do you think would have won the national championship based on the bracket, based on what you have seen this year? Let us know and leave a like on this video. So without further ado, for those of you watching the full-length podcast, thank you for sticking around. Gonzo, you have any final remarks before we sign it off here?
I'm excited for bowl season, and appreciate the games, even though they have kind of been changed with opt-outs and just the landscape of the sport changing.
I can agree with you on that, but got to appreciate as much as you still can. All right, well, this is the Saturday Scholars for Gonzo and Shub signing out. See y'all later. Have a great day and enjoy your college football bowl season this December and into January. Thank y'all and have a good day.